where everyone said hello as they passed. We knew his neighbors, their dogs, their habits. My entire elementary education was reduced to a single school corridor, barely 20 students per class, and always the same faces. From the 1st to the 8th grade, we all knew about each other, who had repeated, which parents divorce, and even who still wet the bed. Secrets never said out loud, but that everyone guessed. We spent our days playing baseball in the cul-de-sac, doing bike races behind us, popcorn, blossom jumps, and a rented VHS from that filthy old video store. It was the 90s. We lived for the Nintendo 64, the pods, and who imitated Jim Carrey the best. My parents trusted me. Maybe too much. By the 3rd grade, I was what was called ladge-gated. I would go home alone, warm up a rock pocket in the microwave, and sit in front of the Fox Kids cartoons until he came. None of us really. There wasn't much to do wrong anyway. Sleepover nights were sacred. Every birthday was marked by battles of nerves, dripping pizzas and peace jokes, until one of us ended up crying or throwing up. Always the same reassuring decor of clean houses, moms in bathrobes, dads preparing burgers, and big brothers ignoring us. So when Mac Wellen invited our entire 6th grade class to his birthday, we thought it would be the same. A candy film can be the old gag of hand in lukewarm water. We didn't know what we were getting into yet. Mac had just arrived in town with his big brother Sam. Their house was in the seedy part of the neighborhood, where the roads weren't even painted and the gardens were just patches of dirt. Sam in 8th grade was nothing like a tall fat man with oily hair, an old mule on his head, still in his torn tank tops, his jaw clenched as if he was chewing on a vacuum. He wasn't really mean, but he made everyone uncomfortable. Just being there with Mac was different. Funny, unpredictable, a little crazy. He was afraid of nothing and didn't care what people thought of him. For a bunch of 12-year-olds, it was exciting. A direct ticket to nonsense that we would never have dared to do alone. So when he handed out his little printed invitations with monster trucks, we all said yes. Of course, not a single one declined. We arrived this Friday evening, sleeping bag on our back, noisy and sure of ourselves. Mac was waiting for us on the porch with his crooked smile. It was in the crooked side of the house, or rather the shack looked tired, sagging, almost abandoned. Lawn chairs dented in front of beer cans crushed in the window frame. A shutter hanging by a single hinge. Sam was standing in the doorway, arms folded, just his gaze following us inside, the air stinking, the laundry damp, and the fat burned. The carpet in the living room was crunchy gray under our shoes. Mac's mother came out of the kitchen, hair pulled back, cheeks protruding, pink so thin you could see through it. Nobuha. Half the boys turned scarlet when they saw her. She handed us cardboard plates with cake already on them, saying, "Have fun tonight." Then she left again. A minute later, we heard a door slam and the engine of a car drive away. They go to the bar, so it's Mark. We have the whole house to ourselves, and weirdly, it froze me. I had never experienced a sleepover without adults within earshot, but no one protested. We didn't want to pass for babies. At first it was the blast, music blaring, sugar overdose, hallway brawl, Sam prowling, observing a weird smile on his lips whenever one of us fell or got hurt. Around 9 o'clock, Mac told us he had better than a movie. He took us to his room that he shared with Sam and opened the wooden chest. Inside were stacks of unlabeled cassettes, one of which he slipped into the VCR. The flickering image revealed a room, not a movie, a real room. And very quickly we understood. It was her mother naked, her father behind her, filmed like that. The whole room froze. Some snickered nervously, but no one was really breathing. Sam stood behind us, arms folded. "Do you like it?" My dad was filming everything and I wanted to leave right away, but my legs wouldn't move. Mark was laughing. What if we looked at others? He took out sex toys out of a drawer, dirty stuff that smelled like latex, fronts that he swung around. A boy grabbed them and then let go like it was hot. Then Sam pulled out a small wooden box. He opened it inside, a real revolver, shiny, oiled. He lifted it towards the ceiling, then towards one of us. Bang at. He screamed dry. Everyone jumped. Mac chuckled and ran away. Charged, but his voice was shaking. Sam began to circle, pressing the cannon to our foreheads, one after the other. I didn't breathe the cold metal on my skin. The clatter of the dog, arming it gently and without a smile. What if he whispered, then he moved on to the next one. After that, nothing was the same. The games had ceased to be games. Sam kicked the starving dog who barked too much. Mac caught a mouse in a shoebox and tossed it into the sink grinder. The noise, I still hear it. Then a small snake came out of an aquarium and ended up in the microwave. Sam looked away. The point of no return came when they set fire to the neighbor's trash can with flammable liquid. Flames erupted. Sam spun around, barefoot, laughing. The rest of us were staring at each other. It was no longer rebellion. It was no longer nonsense. It was something else. I took my bag, tightened my shoelaces with trembling fingers, and left his house without a word. The night outside seemed immense. I didn't run. Every step resonated. I felt like they were following me, or worse, that something from the movie had crossed the screen and walked behind me. 8 blocks away, I walked through the door of my house. My parents were in front of the news. My mother was knitting. My father was drinking his tea when they saw me. They hugged me. My father turned off the TV. I told them everything. The gun, the tapes, the animals. Anything, but I couldn't put into words Sam's look, Mac's empty laugh. The next day, the school and the police were already aware of it. Other parents had called. The Wallen house was soon overrun by cops. The tapes and tears were seized. Sam was sent elsewhere, Mac suspended. The dog was taken to the pound. The house was put up for sale, then walled up, finally razed. Today there is not even grass growing there. We never really talked about it again, but neither of us came out unscathed. I changed that night. I learned to lock my doors, listen to the sound of locks, stay away from parties and nights out. A part of me died that night, but another was born. More suspicious, more lonely and honest. I think I prefer that. I've only been to one sleepover in my entire life. One. And that was more than enough. It's not that my parents were super strict or religious, no. They just wanted to know the families I slept with. After house again. It was in 5th grade. The kid's name was Tommy Jurgens. Everyone loves Tommy, a loud-mouthed little nervous kid with a false self-confidence who was going to know why it worked. He knew all the cheat codes on PlayStation and knew how to spit straight into the sky at 250 meters and then catch his drool in his mouth. That kind of kid we felt was cool, but we didn't really know Tommy. Not really. A good part of what made him cool came from the fact that he was raised by a bunch of complete nuts. Sometimes we had clues. He never brought lunch, just crumpled bills and scratched tickets. He'd say grown-up things like, "My mom's boyfriend came out again," or "Uncle Mike got busted in Flagstaff." At the time, it was all over us. Tommy what? He had been with us since grade 2. He didn't have that many close friends, but we all wanted to hang out with him. His life seemed electric, different. So when he handed out invitations written in marker on a notebook sheet full of mistakes, he said yes without even asking my parents. He wasn't thrilled to. They relented. I think my mom talked to her mom 90 seconds straight before she agreed. "Okay, but if anything seems weird to you, you call us. I really mean it." Friday arrives and we all get off the bus, excited. Tommy lives on the edge of town, in a spanking house. with 4 pickups in front and 2 rotten boats in the yard, not close to seeing the water again. The garage is open and I swear a real drum kit is being assembled. Guys lugging around, amps inside. We haven't even taken our bags out yet. Tommy greets us on the porch with his usual smile. "You're going to blow a cable." He wasn't lying when he came in. I felt like I was at a party at my uncle's house, not a kid's birthday party. Already, there were adults, friends, relatives, I imagine, drinking, smoking, and laughing in the living room. Without the slightest attention to us, piles of beer thrown on the table. In the kitchen, the hallway smelled of burnt popcorn, drowned in thick grass smoke. At the time, we were too young to understand exactly what was wrong. It just seemed chaotic. Loud music, iced soda, big yard. We thought we just landed on the coolest birthday in the world with no idea what was in store for us. The courtyard looked as big as a football field, a rusty trampoline, a crooked foot that leaned over 2 components. Someone had taped an old dart target to a half-dead mesquite. The ground, a patchwork of dirt and thin grass strewn with empty cans. In the center, a cooler full of orange soda and RC cola, like a treasure that was looted immediately. Then the group landed, I'm not kidding. A real local band, 4 guys in ripped jeans and dark glasses, carrying their equipment up to a stage, a plywood plate and placed on cinder blocks. There was a shirtless vest underneath. It was called Cold Tree. The singer yelled into the microphone, "We're going to wake up this city," a scream so high that all the dogs in the neighborhood began to bark. You give love a bad name. All the CM2 farts. Even the timid ones jumped to the beat as if it were a real concert. We were 11 drinking sodas, throwing darts at a tree, listening to a Bon Jovi cover band, while some unidentified drunk guy at the battalion grilled hot dogs on the front porch. It was insane, and yes, a little great. When the sun went down and killed him, electric fly turned on, the mood changed. The adults were getting pasty. We were only a few beers away. Bottles of hard liquor came out. I saw a guy pour a clear liquid into a red cup, then stagger to the garage. Inside, other guys, in their 20s I'd say, were playing darts for money. Tickets spread out on a washing machine like a poker table. Tommy's father, or whoever was thought to be his father, was a massive guy, glistening with sweat, cargo shorts, big chains around his neck. He was barking on a certain channel about cheating. "You crossed the line, you asshole, I saw you," he said. Shane, a tall, skinny, red-haired guy, was holding a dart as if he were going to put it in an eye. A second target was hung in the garage for the adults. We hung there, planted, taped. Tyler blew. "We shouldn't get out of here, we didn't have time." Shane threw his dart, missed the target completely, and Tommy's knock over a toolbox and then hit back with fists. The next 10 seconds were nothing but noise. Metal clashing, flesh hitting, glass shattering. A guy was thrown against the water heater with a bullet ball. We were frozen. Some of the kids started crying. The fight stopped when Tony's mother, who was chaining cigarettes on the front porch, came out screaming to stop everything. A raspy voice, "Saddle and vinegar." I saw him dig his nails into Tommy's father's arm and pull him out by the skin. The party starts grumbling again and the group has relaunched the song as if nothing had happened. From there, the line between. Soon after, the drugs came out. Not a discreet little joint of the real cam. A coffee table was cleared and Tommy's mother spilled a sandwich bag filled with green grass and a pile of white powder. I thought it was flour for a second, but it wasn't. A certain Zek started chopping this up with a blockbuster card. "Don't worry, it's not coke, just a little go fast like that makes it okay." Another adult, I think. The aunt was puffing on a glass pipe singing Panama. Tommy came back from the garage with a big silly grin and a big joint like candy. We stared at him mute. "Bro, shoot on this." and he said to Cody Anderson. Cody retreated like a viper. Tommy shrugged, pulled a tough, coughed like a dying man, then laughed until he collapsed. At that moment, I was still amused, in a dangerously tightrope walking way, as if we had slipped into a forbidden movie and were holding our breath to avoid getting caught. It was crazy, yes, and not terrifying yet. We ended up outside, slumped on lawn chairs, drinking lukewarm soda, watching Cold Free was finishing his set. The adults were stoned, staggering, laughing, forgetting their own names, telling a ghost story when screams were heard again. Same voices. Tommy's dad, and obviously, Shane. You rolled me, no, you're just bad at darts, Shane. Then another crash, a scream, people running. We got up. 2 kids ran to the side of the house. The rest of us went around the garage, holding our breath. I could already feel the air changing, this heavy that falls suddenly. Shane was on the floor, blood on his shirt. Tommy's father held a folding knife with a knuckle guard. Shane was moaning, hand on his side. Someone screamed, and there, bang, bang, bang. 3 real close shots, deafening. Total chaos. Tommy's mother went out on the lawn in tears. One of the musicians tackled the gunman and managed to snatch the gun from him. No one was hit by miracle, but he had casings on the floor. The charm was broken. It was no longer a party. It was a war zone. The cops arrived in less than 10 minutes, sirens blaring. I got red and blue ranfard on the lawn, like a crime club. I was still in the backyard, my shoes in my hand, trembling to the point that he could no longer storm the stage. Cody Anderson was crying. We just got shot. We just got shot. They gathered us on the sidewalk. Oh yes, don't move. The neighbors were out, talking to the officers, pointing at the house as if it were a soap opera. A woman wrapped in a blanket asked me if I was okay. I nodded. That was wrong. The parents arrived one after the other. Headlights lined the street. The look on my mother's face when she saw me, I will never forget. No questions, she hugged me as if I had just returned from the front. Tommy's dad got handcuffed and loaded up. Shane left in the ambulance, conscious but bleeding through a pack of floppy pads pressed against his ribs. Other adults got questioned in the driveway. A guy walked out before giving his name, disappeared with a backpack full of I don't want to know what. We didn't go back to school on Monday, and neither did Tommy. The rumors buzzed, the gun was stolen, the powder from Lamed, a musician and extoller. I didn't care, I just wanted to forget. No way. My mother told me at school that I'm not allowed to sleep at anyone's house anymore, not as long as you live with me and don't pay your bills, she said. At the end of the discussion, I did not protest. Last I heard, Tommy and his family moved to Yuma. He never came back. And like I said at the beginning, I've never done a sleepover again, ever. My wife and I were trying to have a child. We were delighted. When he was born, he was wanted and loved. We covered him with affection. I really did my best to give him a happy life. But since the day we brought him back from the hospital, he has been unhappy and cried for 13 months. I'm not exaggerating, 13 months without interruption. He cried until he had no voice. You could see her little face wrinkling up without any noise coming from her totally rock mouth. Sometimes he literally cried in his sleep. I've never seen or heard of another child being able to do that. We took him to the doctor of specialist doctors. We tried to change his diet. We even held him in our arms, rocked him, offered him toys. We wrapped him up and tried to soothe him with music, everything we could think of, but nothing worked. 13 months of gnashing teeth with no sleep, hell. Once he got past the crying stage, we thought we were out of it. But it soon became clear that for some unknown reason, He was just angry to be alive. I've never seen this kid have a real happy smile, and all the time I've known him I have. Seeing a vicious and horrible smile spread all over his face, taking a perverse pleasure causing pain and suffering in a single second, he would have made even a single genuine smile showing that he was happy. Not once was he not interested in anything positive. He was fueled by hatred, and everything he did was oriented towards Versa. And as soon as he could walk, his only mission in life was to create stories. He tried to break everything within his reach. He crushed them, chewed them, flushed them down the toilet, whatever he could do. After a while, he figured out how to remove his diaper and took great pleasure in pooping and pissed wherever he could. After a while, he realized that he could hide it and started urinating and defecating in places where they wouldn't be found right away, or by crushing them on the carpets, which made cleaning even more difficult, making the house. When he grew up between the ages of 9 and 15, he would pee and shit in our bed until we put a lock on our door and he couldn't get back in. Then he took a shit in the hallway across from our room. This biological warfare started when he was 2.5 years old, and he never got out of that phase. I'm going to try to pick up the pace because I could literally go on for days on this subject, but as he grew up he became more and more unmanageable. He was biting, kicking, screaming, claw and spit on anyone who tries to do anything to him. He was expelled from school twice before the age of 9. They put him in a special class that kept him away from the other students. We had to install a door and lock in the kitchen because he always had knives and used them to reach walls, furniture, big scars from it. It became even darker. This time he was setting things on fire and torturing local animals. I take this opportunity to get ahead of the mountain of messages I may receive. Yeah, we've been in fucking therapy with the kid. He saw a psychiatrist twice a week, and God only knows how many different medications he was prescribed. Over the years, nothing worked, therapy didn't work, and drugs didn't do anything. Nothing fucking works. It was like a poisonous cloud of hatred and fury that fell over everything in his reach. When my son turned 16, my wife got pregnant again. I can't tell you how different our reaction was. This time, instead of joy, we felt horror. This pregnancy was not planned, and we had no idea what to do. My son had been an endless nightmare for 16 years. We couldn't bear the thought of doing it all over again. From the beginning, we have considered terminating a pregnancy, but at first, it is not so easy to do nowadays. And secondly, my wife is very opposed to this idea. We talked about several options, but in the end we decided that my wife would have the baby, and if it got bad, we would put him up for adoption. We knew we couldn't relieve that another child who would be similar to our son. We had a daughter. She was normal. Suddenly we saw what our life should have been all this time. She laughed at everything. She suckled without biting. She obviously had no teeth, but you could see that she was just trying to eat and not rip off her mother's breast. After 4 months normal, I can't describe the relief and happiness we both felt. I have no words for it. That's when I believe I started to drift away from my son. Before, no matter what mistakes I may have made, I was always trying to do the best I could for my son. I am convinced I tried to help him, love him, and take care of him. I really tried, but when my oldest daughter, my wife, and myself instinctively turned to her, she became ours. Enter not out of malice, but because she was easier to live with. She was so happy and sweet. Every moment I spent with her was magical. I understand it was wrong, but honestly, we couldn't help ourselves. I don't have a better explanation than that. My son had nothing to do with my wife's pregnancy. I really don't know if he understood what was going on, but when we brought our daughter home, he started acting even worse. I didn't think it was possible, but it seems to have gone up a notch. At that time he was about 17. We were all arguing. Every day, usually after an argument, he stormed out of the house and disappeared for hours or returned the next morning. It was a relief. Axel started looking forward to our arguments because it allowed him to get away from us for a while. After the birth of our daughter, my relationship with my son almost completely disappeared. Our only real interactions were yelling at each other. My wife was even worse with him. She didn't same room as her, she would just stop what she was in to do it and start screaming, "Get out of my sight," until he leaves. He started spending more and more time out of the house, which was a blessing for us. I had no idea what he was doing out there. We were just glad it wasn't inflicted on us as a result of our son's behavior. We had invested heavily in locks placed throughout the house. All the thin, cheap interior doors have been replaced by thick, dense wooden doors that cannot be pushed in and equipped with locks, including my wife and I. Keys? I know this may sound extreme, but locks and heavy doors were the best way we could find to create a safe space to protect us from it. Again, before I got too many messages, I wasn't locking my son in his room like some kind of prisoner. He had a free field in the house and could come and go as he pleased. My wife and I locked ourselves in rooms to protect ourselves from him. In fact, we were prisoners in our own home. On the day in question, I had a fight with my son in the morning. My wife and I were enjoying a little and quiet in the kitchen while our daughter slept. All of a sudden, my daughter started crying. Any parent with young children can tell you what he needs. It cries differently when they are hungry, if they need to be changed, or if they are just restless and want to be rocked. Babies can communicate quite well before they talk. This scream, however, was none of that. It was a cry of terror. The second we heard it, my wife and I got up from our chairs and ran. The door was locked, of course, and it took a few seconds to find the right key and open it. My son was in the room. We were living in a bungalow, and that bastard had climbed through the window to get to her. He was standing over his crib with a meat knife in his hand. I have no idea where he got it. He wasn't one of ours. We controlled our knives very carefully and always kept them in locked drawers. I think he may have taken it from one of our neighbors. He had already punctured her skin twice. Once on her stomach, the other on her arm. I could see blood when I entered the room. He was rubbing the back of the knife over his face. No cut. He seemed to tease her as she screamed. He looked up at us and smiled. Before I knew what I was doing, I was already running to get between them. I didn't think, I just moved instinctively. Despite that, my wife arrived before me. It was like in a time-lapse movie. She reached out to our son and pushed it with all her weight. It flew out of the crib and bounced against the wall. I held my daughter while my wife scanned us. I could see her trembling, almost convulsing. I remember the smell of the room, the sound of my daughter screaming and moaning, the look of my son standing there empty, nothing at all, like dead. There was nothing in his eyes. Not the slightest emotion. He looked like an alien to me. I watched my wife take a step towards him. I could have reached out and stopped him, but I didn't. She took another step closer to him. Again, I could have stopped him, but I didn't. So far, could you imagine that my wife was a typical woman, small in stature, sensitive and delicate? That's not the case. My wife is admittedly a small size, but she is not sensitive or delicate and never has been since I've known her since she was a teenager. My wife is a boxer, MMA. Didn't exist at the time, but karate and boxing were very popular at the time, and my wife was a very talented amateur. She weighed a little under 60 kilos and had a lot of muscle, and she knew how to hit. At the time, I was 30 kilos heavier than her, and I have no doubt that in a real fight between her and me, she would have beaten me to a pulp. Neither of us would have raised a hand in anger over our son before, but something broke in her that day. All those years of anger, pain, grief and frustration erupted when she hit him. His head snapped back abruptly and blood began to flow from his nose. He barely reacted. He just looked at him with this shocked expression, as if he didn't know how to react to what had just happened. She waited a second, then hit him again. I could have reached out to stop her, but I didn't. I stood there and watched her as she began to systematically pulp him into mush. Every time he raised his hands to cover a part of his body, she had been sending 100 shots to another part of his body, his head, his body, over and over again. He started screaming, crying, screaming for her to stop. It was the most sincere reaction he had ever had in his entire life, but she didn't stop. I watched it, increased its course, hitting harder and faster, working it like a punching bag. He tried heat back, but she dodged it easily. She was on autopilot and reacted like training. I stood there watching the scene for a few minutes, then turned my back on them. I got my daughter out of the room third time on the sole of her foot, but all the cuts remained superficial. I cleaned her up and held her until she calmed down. Then I put bandages on his wounds in our room. I could hear my son screaming and insulting my wife horribly, telling her he was going to cut off her head and sodomize her corpse. After a while, I didn't hear him say anything. I didn't even hear him scream. I guess he must have been knocked out, but I could still hear my wife hitting him. It lasted a very long time, long enough for my daughter to fall asleep in my arms. I sat at the kitchen table waiting for my wife to finish. Finally, she came out and sat across from me. His hands were swollen and red, his face and arms covered in blood, his chest heaving. We looked at each other without saying anything. After a while I asked him, "Is he dead?" She looked at me and said, "I hope so." I nodded, and that was all there was to say on the subject. I totally understood how she was feeling, and I agreed with you. I didn't know what to do, so we just sat and waited to take a shower. I stood there holding our daughter in my arms. Then after a long time I heard moans and sobs coming from the bedroom. Turns out my son wasn't dead. I went in to see how bad it was, and was pretty ugly to look at. I've never seen a more merciless blow in my entire life. He was lying on the floor, rolling in all directions, his face bloody, his nose was totally crushed, and his two eyes completely closed and swollen, already starting to black. I could see that two of his fingers. I think he must have been missing teeth, but I didn't see any on the floor, and I couldn't see the inside of his mouth either, since his lips were all swollen. For having told my wife about it later, I know she wanted to. Breaking every part of his body, focusing more on his lungs, she told me that she punched his breath repeatedly until his legs couldn't take it anymore, and that she continued to attack him long after he passed out. When my wife got out of the shower, I still didn't know what to do with our son. I didn't know whether to call the police or an ambulance, cared what could happen to him, and we decided to let him live or die on his own. There was a wall suite in the basement that we never really used. My wife, daughter, and I moved there. We just allocated the top floor of the house to my son and locked everything down, his parents, our lives entirely. There was plenty of food in the upstairs cabinets, enough to last 2 weeks or more. We had the bathroom in the basement, a small kitchenette, and a separate entrance, allowing us to stop going upstairs. We decided we were done with him. I figured we'd let his food run out and see what happens. Over the next week, we heard him move upstairs. I think he spent most of his time lying in bed recovering. I used to go to work staying alert in case he attacked me in the driveway, but he never did. My wife stayed at home with our daughter. She never took her eyes off her. One night we heard him go crazy, heating and destroying everything that might be in the house, but we didn't react. He never tried to get down or get near us. I think he was afraid my wife would finish the job after 3 weeks in the basement. It had been several days since we had heard anything coming from above. I ventured sign of my son. He was gone. It took months to repair the damage he had done. There was food and shit all over the walls, broken glass on the floor, holes in the drywall. He had demolished everything, ripped the lino in the corner of the kitchen, and emptied the foam fire extinguisher in the living room. I was grateful that he didn't burn the house down. I still don't know why he didn't. He had no hesitation setting fires in his childhood. Later, I feared daily for our lives, expecting his return for vengeance. 3 years after escaping, we finally felt a small sense of safety. Born in shadows persist. So 70 this year, and my wife passed away from cancer in 2016. My daughter is 34 now. I moved in with her and her husband after my wife passed away. I have 2 little girls who are my greatest joy. I see a therapist twice a month to talk about it. I don't know where my son is. The last time I saw him, he was lying on the floor, bloody broken. I haven't heard from him since he left over 30 years ago, but I don't want to. I carry a lot of guilt since that time and a lot of conflicting emotions. I didn't beat him myself, but I let it go, and I thought he deserved it. I didn't try to kill him, but I would have been happy for him to die. In a way, I hope he was able to overcome his demons and lead a normal life differently. If he wasn't able to change, if he stayed the way he used to be, then I really hope someone killed him. And it doesn't matter how it happened. I just wish he wasn't out there hurting other people yet. Chris and I had been working night shifts long enough to have our rhythm, but this night seemed weird from the start. The first time the black sedan appeared, the clock read 12 o'clock. I saw her walk around the parking lot slowly, then disappear, leaving dust and anguish behind her. It returned at 01:10, then again at 01:45, repeating the same slow circuit. I tried to see inside, but the windows were too tinted. When I mentioned it to Chris, he shrugged and said, "They may be lost. It's a Mayan highway." We got back to work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen. And it happened around 2 o'clock in the morning. I was scrubbing the counter when I heard doors slam. I looked up to see two guys in black hoodies approaching. Something about the way they moved tightened my heart before I could alert Chris. They kicked down the door, make a noise, and you'll be the last one to yell at one of them, pulling out his penny gun. His wish, he held a crowbar, as if he knew how to use it. His accomplice pulled out a hunting knife. I tried to open the crate, but my hands were shaking too much. Chris came out of the kitchen and instantly, gently, turned pale, and he says, "Hands in the air, take what you want." The guy with the knife jumped the counter and pushed me. I stumbled at Chris's feet as the thief took the money, grunting in disappointment. $340. Where's the rest? He demanded, scrutinizing everywhere, talking where I begin to decide, that's all we have. Please. We didn't stutter. He answered me with a slap so violently that my ears rang. Lie again and you'll see him whistle. Chris tried to intervene, but the man with the crowbar stopped him. The blow hit his ribs, knocking him to his knees before he could get up. The thieves pushed both of us to the back of the shop. He kept demanding money, shouting obscenities between blows when he still couldn't find anything. The guy with the knife cracked, but before he could get to me, Chris pulled me and shoved me into the freezer. He slammed the door against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Through the small steel window, I saw everything collapse. Chris was already bleeding from his ribs, but he stepped between the thieves and the freezer, yelling at them to back off, to leave us alone. They didn't listen. The crowbar guy hit him in the face, blowing his nose off. Still, he didn't let go. I don't remember ever feeling so helpless and scared when they finally hit Chris hard enough in the temple. His hands let go, and I froze. I watched in horror as the guy with the knife broke free and headed for the freezer. Chris propelled himself off the ground and pinned him right in front of my window. He was on top, trying to control the man beneath him. That's where the guy with the iron bar shot him in the back of Chris's skull. My best friend has become inert. The guy with the knife pushed him away, let him roll on his back before driving the blade into his stomach. On his back, his arms were spread and there were 3 holes in his torso. Blood gushed with every heartbeat. His mouth opened and closed, but only blood came out. He tried to breathe but couldn't get any air. He turned his head toward the freezer, his hands slipping across the floor, leaving a trail of blood behind. Steel chutes separated us and I couldn't reach him. I saw his lips move. I couldn't hear him through the trail on the white door. His eyes remained open, still in my direction, but they saw nothing. What I remember most is the cold seeping into my bones and staying there. How I screamed until I completely lost my voice. How did Chris's blood look almost black under the bright lights instead of being red like it should have been? I don't remember who found us or who called the police, but I remember begging the paramedics to save my friend. They tried for 18 minutes, but 3 stab wounds and massive internal bleeding were irreversible. In the end, Chris lost the battle. Police caught his thugs 6 hours later at a motel 2 cities away. From there, they still had the knife and $347 in cash. It was the price of my best friend's life. I don't think I'll ever make it. Sometimes late at night, I still feel that icy cold. I see Chris's hands slide over the door, leaving this red trail behind. The storm hit around midnight, causing the McDonald's sign to wobble and the windows to shake. I worked at the drive, which meant wearing that stupid helmet and pretending to be happy. Night shifts weren't usually so quiet, but the storm had driven everyone away. I was wiping the beverage dispenser when the headset beeped. "Welcome to McDonald's. That I may serve you." Crackles crossed the line before a male voice came through, as if someone was calling from the bottom of a swimming pool. "Medium fries, vanilla milkshake." "Okay, move forward to the first window." I looked at the camera screen, but I couldn't see a car or headlight. There was only the empty parking lot and the loudspeaker hammered by the pouring rain. Sir, are you still there?" I waited about 30 seconds, then pressed the button again. "Sir, if you have a problem with your car," the headset beeped. "Medium fries, vanilla milkshake," he repeated. I checked the camera again, but I still couldn't see it. "Sarah, I called my manager. The drive-through camera's not working well. Someone's ordering, but I can't see anyone." Sarah stepped closer and squinted at the screen. "Probably because of the storm. Go see what happens." I grabbed an umbrella and pushed open the side door. The rain soaked me instantly outside. The parking lot was empty except for our 2 cars. I headed for the driveway. Suddenly I spotted tire tracks. They looked fresh, crossing the puddles and leading from the speaker to the back of the parking lot, but they didn't turn toward the service window like they should have instead. They went straight behind the trash cans into the forest, as if the car had gone into the darkness and disappeared. I hesitated for a moment, but I couldn't ignore the tracks. I followed them deeper into the woods. Headlights flickered through branches barely visible in the rain and trees. A silver sedan was wrapped around a huge tree trunk. The whole front had crashed like a tin can. Steam rose from the destroyed engine, and the windshield was covered in spiderweb cracks. I pulled out my phone with a shaking hand and turned on the flashlight. The driver was still in his seat, slumped against the door, eyes closed in a business suit, drenched in blood. The ends of bone protruded at angles that made my stomach turn. And I could see his brain matter through his bloody hair. He was swimming in a pool of his own blood. His jaw was barely attached by shreds of flesh. "My God," I whispered as I backed away. The women lit up, blinding me, as if someone had just put them in the spotlight. Then a voice whistled directly into my ear, so close that I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. "Did you forget my order?" I turned around, but saw no one behind me, only trees, rain, and darkness. When I looked at the car again, the dead man was sitting upright, eyes wide open, staring at me through the shattered windshield, while blood flowed from his shattered skull. I felt he was neither dead nor alive. I ran through the woods, panting with fear and shock. I didn't stop until I walked through the back door of McDonald's and slammed it. I told the manager everything. Sarah made the call while I stood by the locked door, peering into the darkness. Police arrived about 15 minutes later with paramedics and a fire truck. I guided them into the woods, though all in me wanted to stay inside where they were clear and safe. The car was exactly where I'd left it, still wrapped around that tree, but the headlights were dim again. Now the horn had stopped. The driver was slumped against the door, his eyes closed, just as I had found him the first time. One of the paramedics checked his pulse and shook his head. "He's been dead for at least 4 hours, maybe plus 4 hours. My voice came out, higher than I wanted. But I heard him. He spoke to me, son. Given the damage and body temperature, he must have hit that tree around 8 o'clock tonight. When going around the wreck, it happens sometimes. The battery still has a little juice. It makes the lights flash randomly. I insisted that I had spoken to him, but they all looked at me like I was crazy before they resumed their photos and measurements, and then loaded the body onto a stretcher. I saw them slip him into a black body bag, and the last thing I saw was his ravaged face, disappearing behind the plastic. The cop came up and told me the guy's name was Robert James, 42, insurance salesman from Seattle. He was driving when the storm broke, had to lose control on the wet road and ended up in our woods. They told me it happens more often than you think. No one heard the crash because of the thunder. No one knew he was there until I found him. I resigned the next day. I told them I was going back to school, needed to focus on classes, any excuse that didn't make me look crazy. But I know what I saw, what I heard. Sometimes late at night when it's raining hard, I hear this voice in my head. You forgot my order. I was 17 years old that November, working the closing department at McDonald's on Granville Street in Vancouver. It was a Friday, almost 11:30 p.m., and the rain was pouring down. My colleague Aria was mopping by the toilet while I wiped the tables, both of them staring at the clock. Another 30 minutes, and we could close. That is when a man is whole. At first, he looked like an ordinary late-night customer, soaked from head to toe. Might be a little stoned considering the way he stood at the entrance fixing his clothes to me. A dark hoodie and washed-out gin was soaked and clinging to his body. But what caught my attention was what he was holding in his hand. It was a handmade doll about 30 centimeters long, in a messy ponytail. She was wearing a McDonald's mini uniform. I can help you. I managed a tight smile. My eyes kept coming back to this hideous toy. He didn't answer right away, just continuing to stare with his pale, moist eyes that didn't blink. Then slowly his lips curved into a smile that turned my stomach. You're even prettier in person. His way of saying it sounded less like a compliment than a confirmation of a fact already known. Aria looked up from her mop. Are you ordering something or what? He ignored her completely. I love looking at you, Anna. He took a step forward, the water splashing in his shoes. You always tie your hair the same way. You always clean the table from the left. You're so simple and predictable. It's so cute. My heart stopped. He knew my name and my habits. Who are you? The words came out shakier than I would have liked. His smile became wilder. I brought you something. He held out the doll and I saw it clearly now. The wool hair was exactly the same shade and length as mine. The button eyes were as hazel as mine. Around his neck, a small paper label with Anna written in a slanted handwriting. I made it myself. He beamed. It took me 3 months to get the details perfect. The freckles were the hardest part. He turned the doll's face towards me, and I saw 3 little brown dots sewn on her fabric nose. Aria's going to get Dave, I said in a strangled voice. Aria's not moving, is she? He snorted as he pulled the knife out of his wish pocket, the blade reflecting the fluorescent light. My heart skipped a beat when I saw him press the knife against the doll's belly. You know how long I've been waiting for this moment. His voice broke all his nights in East Easting's 3rd floor corner apartment. You'd better close your bedroom window, my beauty. My legs almost gave out. Dave? Aria cried, backing toward the kitchen. You have to understand, Anna. The blade sank deeper into the doll's cloth belly. You belonged to me from the first time I saw you 6 months ago. I knew it, and if I can't have you... He lowered his eyes to the doll and plunged the knife. The fabric tore with a wet noise. Instead of stuffing, the doll was filled with blood-soaked sponges, raw meat, and tubes of red gel. When he pulled the knife out with pieces of red cloth dripped down his hands before splashing the white tile, the smell of iron and decay hit me immediately. I felt like throwing up. "You see," he said, laughing, clutching the doll until the mess inside exploded to pieces. "How easy it is." He stabbed her again and again. Each shot sent more red, splattering the floor and his clothes. The wet meat inside made sick, sucking noises as the knife went in and out. This is what happens to girls who don't listen and ignore someone who loves them. I watched in horror as he grabbed the doll's head and twisted it until it popped off. More blood and tissue poured out. Slipping along her arms, he lifted the severed head, its butt and eyes still fixed, and brought it close to her face. "Mahana," he murmured as he kissed her. Dave burst through the kitchen door with Arya behind him. What did the man turn back? Knife in one hand, doll's head in the other. Red syrup dripping everywhere. For a second, no one moved. Then the sirens started screaming outside, getting closer, and his face distorted. "They're gonna take me away from you." And he let out a choked voice, backing towards the door. "But they can't keep me away." He clutched the doll's head against him, staining his wish red. The police came in just as he reached the gates. He didn't resist. He stood still in the rain while he handcuffed him. He articulated something. I couldn't hear anything in the chaos, but I could have read her lips. Eyes closed. "You're mine, Anna. You're mine." The police revealed to me that this man had been stalking me for a month. He watched me secretly during my services, maybe even followed me home at night. His name was Marcus Hendrick. Schizophrenic. No medication. No family. That was 10 months ago. I moved to another city, changed my number and dyed my hair blonde. I took a simple job in a bookstore where I never had to work evenings. But some nights I wake up at 3 in the morning, convinced I hear breathing at my window, convinced I see someone in the shadows across the street. The worst part is knowing he's still out there in a cell somewhere, counting the days, thinking and planning, because distances and walls and bars don't do anything to people like Marcus. They don't forget, and they know how to wait beyond eternity. Leslie and I went to Disneyland to have some quiet fun. We rode Space Mountain 3 times in a row, ate our peas in churros and laughed till our faces hurt. It was the first time I had seen Leslie laugh so much in a long time. It felt good to see her laugh. Our day was going well until we spotted this strange man in front of Sleeping Beauty's castle. He was disguised as Judge Claude Frollo of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. The costume was perfect, down to the layered dress, the thick hat, and even the little embroidered details on her sleeves. But what struck me the most wasn't the costume. It was his disturbing expressions. He licked his lips continually, his eyes looking hollow and sunken, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. And in front of him when he spoke to him. "You should be careful. Beauty is a dangerous gift, especially when desired by evil men." I found his imitation creepy yet impressive. Leslie laughed nervously, but the guy stared at her for an unsettlingly long time before vanishing into the crowd. Initially, I dismissed him as a hardcore Disney enthusiast, but over time, his presence was everywhere. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. He was standing near the entrance to the haunted mansion when we got in line, then back to Pirates of the Caribbean, a few rows behind. I showed it as a joke. "Your biggest fan is still following us." Leslie doesn't match. This time she just looked over her shoulder and said, "What a shady guy." And she was right. He wasn't looking around, wasn't checking his phone, wasn't doing anything normal. He was looking at her. Even when we changed zones, he always reappeared a few steps away. Let's go to another section, I say, trying to sound calm. Maybe he's just weird, not dangerous. After the Splash Mountain ride, Leslie wanted to change. His shirt was soaked. She went to the ladies' room near the shop, while I waited outside on my phone, almost forgetting about the guy dressed as Judge Frello. Suddenly, I heard Leslie screaming from the toilet. His voice was loud enough to make the people around him look up. Seconds later, Leslie burst out, pale, shaking, still in her wet clothes. He was inside. He was there, looking at me, smiling. She screamed. I dropped my phone. What? I saw his face in the mirror behind me. He said something, but I couldn't. He was smiling. I walked right in and found the guy standing in the girls' bathroom with that same unhealthy smile frozen on his face. I pinned him to the ground, punching him and screaming obscenities. Blood splattered his chin, but he didn't defend himself. He was just laughing, laying there while I hit him. It was not a normal laugh. It was deep and guttural, like the sound of a church organ vibrating underground. The more I hit him, the louder his laughter got. People were screaming. Now security was running, trying to get me out of the way. I remember a guard yelling at me to stop, saying the man was bleeding, but he didn't feel anything. He was smiling through the blood in Red Way firm. Even when they dragged her out, he looked at Leslie, not me, and said, "You can't hide your beauty, my dear, not from eyes that see through skin." Then he laughed again as he took it away. That sound still plays in my head. Not like a human laugh, but an echo from a hollow place, much deeper than his chest. They took him. Security assured us that they would be banished from the park and handed over to the police. But I noticed their confusion because when they checked his identity, they found nothing. No wallet, no phone, not even a ticket. They should never have been here. We stayed until closing, sitting by Main Street, too shocked to move. Fireworks went off in a moment. Everyone around was cheering and filming, but all I could hear was Leslie sobbing. She rested her head on my trembling shoulder. He wasn't normal, she whispered. I felt it when he looked at me, as if he knew. A week later, Leslie and I returned home. We didn't talk about Disneyland. It felt cursed, as if the place had revealed something rotten to us. Beneath the smiles, I was skipping when Leslie suddenly gasped, "Jamie, step back." We saw that man again, that same face, the one disguised as a freelock, but without the costume. This time, his mugshot filled the screen, pale, tired. But it was him. The announcer's voice was calm, but icy. Authorities identified the man arrested at Disneyland last week as Richard Hale, 43, a repeat offender known for stalking women in public places like theme parks, restaurants, and shopping malls. Police say Hale often disguised himself as a character or employee to blend in with the crowd, before following her victims into isolated. My God. Investigators had searched his apartment and discovered hundreds of printed photos of women at Disneyland in shopping malls and cafes, all taken without their knowledge. Each photo had disturbing captions written underneath it in red ink. Hale reportedly told investigators he admired Judge Claude Frello, claiming he was misunderstood in his own words. Why are there only Disney princesses? Why not Disney villains? The room fell silent. Leslie began to cry softly, and all I could do was hold her hand. Staring at the TV, the reporter moved on to another story, but I couldn't help replaying that unhealthy laugh in my head, that inhuman guttural sound. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a demon. He was worse. He was real. I never thought I would be the kind of person to visit Disneyland. Only my little sister Emily always wanted to go, but that day never came. A drunk driver took her life last December when she was only 9 years old. I still remember the siren shovel, the sanitized smell of the hospital room. I didn't cry right away. I just stopped feeling anything. But when I found her with Disneyland scribbling at the top, so I decided to go. For her it was a sunny after 12 p.m. when I arrived, and everything was exactly as she had imagined. Music played, children laughed, balloons floated in the sky, and I wandered aimlessly. Every smile I saw reminded me of what I had lost. I sat by the fountain in front of Fantasyland, eating a churrod, wisp, when I noticed a man near the carousel. He was a tall, lanky guy with stringy hair. He pretended to check his phone but wasn't looking at the screen. His eyes were fixed on a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. She jumped out. Every time the girl turned around, he looked away, pretending to take pictures or adjust his hat. A shiver went down my spine. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. People look weird all the time. Maybe he was just waiting for someone. A few minutes later, I looked again and saw the man talking to the girl while handing her an ice cream. I was too far away to hear, but I could see that the girl was interested in what he was saying. His parents were distracted, trying to calm the baby down. It's none of my business, I thought to myself. There are cameras, security, people everywhere. But I saw him grab her wrist and start walking away. As soon as the girl realized that the man was taking her away from her parents, she began to cry. But the music and the chaos drowned out his voice. His cries simply dissolved into the noise. He started dragging her to the trail behind Ombo's attraction. I was now certain that the man had bad intentions before he disappeared. I saw her face, eyes wide open, tears streaming down her face, her little hand outstretched, screaming for help. At that moment, I saw Emily, those same desperate eyes she must have had at the time of the accident, calling for someone who never came. Something in me cracked. I got up and ran faster than ever in my life. My heart was beating like a drum in my ears. I didn't even think about it. I just jostled people for hours on end. Arrived against a wall, his belt was half undone. His face had gone from calm to something menacing. For a moment, I froze. Every cell in my body screamed with rage. Then the girl moaned, "Please don't hurt me," and all I could see was Emily, sitting on her bed, asking me to promise her she'd be safe. As I grew older, I could no longer stand still. I threw myself at this monster. The man turned around, surprised, just as I hit her. We both hit the ground hard. I don't remember my words, just the sound of stitches, the taste of blood in my mouth. I hit him until I bruised my knuckles. He tried to fight back, but the rage and grief had made me stronger than ever. I yelled at him, words that didn't even make sense. I just knew this monster wasn't going to hurt her. Not today, ever. When security arrived, he was half conscious, panting, face unrecognizable. The guards pulled me away from him, shouting questions I didn't understand. The little girl ran to one of them sobbing. I was shaking, covered in sweat and dust. My hands were shaking so hard that I had to press them against my knees to calm them down. Later, when everything calmed down, one of the guards led the girl to me. She had bandages on her knees, and her pink backpack was torn. She looked at me with her big, grateful eyes, the same color as Emily's. Then she reached out and took mine. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't even know what to say. I just knelt down to keep up with him. "You're safe now," I managed to articulate. She suddenly squeezed me tight, as if she was afraid to let go, and something broke inside me. I felt heat on my cheeks and realized I wasn't crying. Silent weeping, broken, trembling sobs, months of guilt and With a sudden surge of pain, I held her like my own sister, as if by saving her, I had finally done what I couldn't do for Emily. When the police took the man away, one of the officers tapped me on the shoulder. "You did well, son," he said, but I could hardly hear it, for in the distance, through the crowd and the lights, I thought I saw a little figure near the carousel, in a For a moment, I saw Emily. She smiled at me and then disappeared. I don't know if it was real or just my imagination, but I felt it there in the laughter of the children, in the breeze that carried the smell of cotton candy. That evening, as the fireworks bench, tears flowed, but they didn't hurt anyone. Somewhere, beyond the lights and stars, I knew she was smiling, proud that her big brother had finally found the courage to be her hero. Even though it was a little late, and for the first time since his death, I smiled back at him. I still get chills when I think of that day. It was supposed to be magic, a perfect Saturday at Disneyland for my daughter, but here she had been talking about it for months. She was 9 years old, and at that age, everything still seems big and possible. She had saved her pocket money to buy Minnie's ears. That morning, she wore them proudly in the back, singing along with Frozen as I drove down Route 5 to Anaheim. It was early, maybe a little after that hour. The sky was soft and golden, the traffic flowing. I remember thinking how good it was to give her something normal, joyful. We had been on the road for a while and everything seemed normal. Suddenly I noticed this woman at the bend in the road ahead. At first she looked like an artist, someone going to an event. A woman in a mini suit on the side of the road, waving her arms as if to ask for help. But as we approached, I saw him more clearly. His suit was dirty and torn. She wasn't wearing a mask, but mini ears and weird makeup on her face. His smile was too big for his face. I slowed down a bit, but here, pointing through the window, "Mommy Minnie is lost." The woman approached, slightly dragging one foot, her red polka dot dress, standing. Her voice was monotonous. When I rolled down the window an inch, "You're going to Disneyland," and she said, "You can take me." I forced a small smile. "I'm sorry, we're in a hurry, I can't," before I could finish. The back door slammed open. I realized what a big mistake I had made by forgetting to lock it. The woman slid in next to Messi, the smell of his sweat. But she already had a knife to Messi's throat and turned left onto the dirt road. My hands froze on the steering wheel. Messi started crying. She whispered, "Mom," and it almost broke me. "Don't hurt him." I said left. There was a dirt road about a kilometer away that I had never noticed. We were surrounded by tall and silent trees. Macy's crying intensified, and she looked at me with terrified eyes, and I wanted so badly to tell her that everything would be okay. But I didn't know if that was true. "Are you okay, sweetie? Mommy's here. Watch the road, Mommy." The woman's hand trembled as she held the knife. She was breathing heavily, almost gasping. We drove deeper into the woods until we saw a rotten cabin leaning on its side, covered with ivy. The woman pointed her finger at Minnie's house. "You'll love it. It's magical." I stopped, my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. She walked out slowly, still holding the knife. For a moment, she turned toward the house as if to check something. It was my only chance. "But here, get down," I shouted, crushing the accelerator. The car leapt forward, the woman's arm hit the opening door and she staggered backward. I didn't look, I just drove. She started throwing stones at my car. fear, but I kept my cool. I had to. I just kept driving, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the right steering wheel. We pulled onto the main road, tires screeching, and I drove until I saw other cars, normal people. I pulled up near a gas station, jumped out and ran to the back. But here was curled up, crying, hysterically with glass in her hair, but fortunately not injured. I took her and held her close. She was shaking, panting between her sobs. "Mommy, I love Minnie more." It broke me. I couldn't say anything. I just held her tighter. Police arrived about 20 minutes later. They took our statements, searched the area, but couldn't find the woman. They said he might be a vagabond. Someone stoned, unstable. But when I told them about the costume, how she seemed to know this hidden dirt road, they just looked at each other without saying anything. That night, Macy didn't want to sleep in her room. She kept repeating that she saw Minnie outside the window. Every noise made her jump. I slept next to her for weeks. After that, a few days later, out of morbid curiosity, I passed this stretch of highway again in broad daylight. I wanted to see if I had perhaps imagined it, but when I reached the spot where I'd first seen it, something caught my eye. Minnie Mouse's red ears lay in the dirt by the shoulder, half buried, the same kind Macy wore that morning. She still had hers, which meant this one wasn't hers. I didn't stop, I just kept driving. To this day, I don't know who that woman was, or what would have happened if I hadn't left. But sometimes when I drive at night and see someone on the side of the road, my body freezes. I think of that voice, that flat, emotionless voice that says, "Are you going to Disneyland?" But here is bigger now. We haven't been back to Disneyland yet. She doesn't even want to go. She says it's no longer magic, and frankly, I understand. Because for me, this stretch of highway, this line with its light signs and palm trees, will never again be the road to Disneyland. It became the road where we almost died. I was 15 years old visiting my grandparents before Halloween in Granger Hollow. It was a small, lost town. But my cousin Evan acted like he knew it by heart and had been praising this fair for days. On Halloween night, we walked to the fairground on the edge of town. The place was lit with flickering torches and orange garlands. It bathed everything in an eerie glow. The air was full of smoke and fire and smell and hay and spicy cider. I have to admit, the atmosphere was really cool. There were bizarre trinket stands, cart rides in fake cemeteries, and crazy costumes. Evan quickly ditched me to pick up girls dressed as... That's when I felt a tap on the shoulder. I turned and almost jumped. Behind me stood a clown straight out of a nightmare. His suit was worn and patched as if it had been rotting in a cellar for decades. The makeup was thick and cracked, with a smile painted far too wide. Her pale blue eyes seemed to count every time I blinked. He held out a candy wrapped in plastic, but covered in hair and dust as if it had come out of a trash can. "You want some candy?" It's out. He proposed with a grimace. I looked at the disgusting candy. Then his face, the vibe around him gave me goosebumps. "No thanks," I said, stepping back. He didn't add anything. Just stand there, holding out this disgusting candy. As I walked away quickly, I found Evan near the haunted house. He was always trying to impress his daughters dressed as princesses. Man, he one super creepy clown towards games. Really deranged kind. A clown is probably just Friendo, one of the giggling girls. It's like the legend of the village, you see. "Don't worry, he's harmless," Evan said without looking at me. "Just a crazy old man in disguise." But as I walked through the party, I kept seeing him out of the corner of my eye. A second, he was behind the apple stand. Then I saw him near the walk, in a cart or prowling toward the campfire. As soon as I stared at him, he disappeared. Every time I mentioned it to Evan, he laughed and shrugged. There, I grabbed Evan's arm and pointed my finger. You see, at the entrance of the corn maze, he fucks Evan chips. Evan followed my finger and saw Friendo frozen like a statue staring at us. Okay, because you're my cousin, Evan scoffed, picking up a pebble. Hey, Friendo, catch. He threw it at the clan. I saw the stone hit his forehead. Blood immediately ran down her face, mixing with the white makeup. Friendo didn't scream or grimace. He didn't even touch the wound. He stared at us for a few seconds, letting the blood soak his clothes before he melted into the crowd. Damn, Evan, why did you do that? Don't worry, he'll get over it. But I felt like we just screwed up. By midnight, the party was over. Families were gone, leaving teens and drunken adults staggering. Evan, tired of flirting, suggested we go back to my grandma's instead of the road. The fair, it's faster. 8, he said. A thick fog limited visibility to a few meters. The ears of corn rustled above us in the wind. Halfway there was the hoarse, broken laugh like a gargle. Echoed in the field, somewhere behind us. Did you hear that? Just whisper. Evan stopped walking. The laughter came closer. We turned and I saw a shape in the fog. Tall and strange, he staggered towards us. Between the ranks, nothing, I exclaimed. I or you? Dry blood blackened his face. He held a shiny object. As I approached, I saw that it was an axe. The dark blade was surely not rust. His painted smile seemed to widen, covering his entire face. Run, Evans whispered, and we ran into the corn. Whipped by the rods, behind Friendo's laughter intensified. He seemed to enjoy this situation. I could hear his horrible laugh approaching, moving closer. Exhausted, cotton-legged, I kept running this way. Eva grabbed me and pulled me to the right. One emerged from the cornfield onto the road, sprinting towards the city lights. I glanced over and saw Friendo at the edge of the field, jumped his head. He wasn't chasing us anymore. We were part of it. We ran to my grandparents' house, locked up, and spent the night in the living room, jumping at the slightest noise. Grandfather found us in the morning, the air of having seen a ghost when we told him, his face to pale. Avoid the harvest festival now, and he says softly. Some traditions here are better left alone. I don't know who Friendo really was, what he became, but I do know one thing. I will never celebrate Halloween at Granger Hollow again, because he dragged me to that Halloween party against my will, knowing that I hated parties and crowds and all that cinema. Julia will be there, he said with a wink. As he approached, my heart sank. He's cute and clearly interested. Interested was an understatement. Julia had been stalking me for months. It started when I had the misfortune of being polite to her at Starbucks. Then she would pop up everywhere I went, leaving creepy stuff. Dead birds in black cloth, jars of earth and hair. When I told her to let go, she smiled and talked about the good moon. This girl was completely crazy, but I couldn't let her run my life. I figured I'd enjoy the party, which I did, until I saw her again. She was on the other side, dressed as tent black weapons. Her makeup looked like rotting skin. Cracked gray, glued to the bone, hollow eyes, red lenses, glowing like embers in the dim light, stringy hair on his shoulders. Could be a wig with lipstick smeared at the corner. I tried to ignore him, but I could feel his eyes following me everywhere. Around 12 o'clock, she cornered me near the kitchen. "Dance with me, Eric." She purred hoarsely. "Stay away. You can't run from fate. You're crazy. Get treated." She wrinkled her nose but pulled back, her lips moving, muttering. I left discreetly 3 blocks from my house. A street light flickered. I ignored that and kept walking, but at the turn, there she was, this Gladys suit, rotten makeup and stringy hair. Instead of red lenses, her eyes were black like ink, not just the tube. The whole eye, like ink, had been poured into it. "We have to finish that," she says. "There's nothing to finish. Leave me alone." I tried to pass, but she grabbed my wrist. His skin was cold, his grip strong enough to leave bruises. You have no choice but to whistle. Before I could react, she grabbed a handful of my hair. Pain shot through my skull as she pulled, ripping strands of hair out. "What are you doing there?" She took out a twisted piece of wood full of thorns and wrapped my hair around it. Her voice deepened as if something was speaking through her. "You belong to me," Eric whispered, her warm breath against my ear. "Body and soul." The twig warmed near my chin before it burned. She broke it in two, still singing. The air got thick. "You're crazy," I shouted, pushing her away. Finally, she stumbled without falling. "I'd rather die than be with you," I screamed. "It can be fixed." She laughed, attacking me with the twig, thorn towards my eyes. I ran into the street, my sneakers pounding on the concrete. I could hear those footsteps, but it wasn't a normal run. It was a strange rhythm, like she was dancing. I looked back and immediately regretted it. She was moving abnormally, arms too loose, head tilted at an unsettling angle. But she was catching up with me. I cut through an alley, skipping bag and avoiding trash. Out of breath, I could hear those crazy jumps and laughs getting closer. When I looked back, she was 10 feet away, with this awful stretched smile. "Eric, you can't run away forever," she screamed. I stormed out of the alley onto the main street. My building was still 2 blocks away. My legs would tense up, but as soon as I slowed down, I could hear those good and those songs coming closer to the corner. I glanced back. Julia was only a few steps away, her hands outstretched toward me. I could feel the warmth of her body mingling with mine before she caught me. I dug my elbow into his ribs, strong. I felt him recoil. Hearing a crack, without looking twice, I sprinted away, as if my life depended on it. Maybe it was the step. I reached my building, slammed the door, and put all the locks on. I barely slept that night. As soon as I closed my eyes, I could see so many Gladys smiling. The next morning, Kyle broke the news to me. They found Julia unconscious on the sidewalk around 3:00 a.m. with a severe head injury. At the hospital, she remembered nothing. Not even his name or address. The weird thing, Kyle says, is all her hair strewn where they found her. Human hair and burnt wood. I touched my aching skull where she had pulled my hair out. Doctors said Julia's amnesia could be permanent. I feel a little guilty for pushing her, but mostly I was relieved. If she didn't remember me, maybe the nightmare was finally over. I never thought I was afraid of my phone, but every Snapchat notification freaks me out now. It all started a few months ago, when my buddy showed me some messages he was getting. We were hanging out in his room after class when he got super quiet and handed me his phone. The screen showed a snap of a certain Talon Lagoon. It was a video of a kid getting punched in the face and then beaten to the ground. The legend, who claimed that, will be next, turned my stomach. When I asked Preston who it was, he shrugged, but I could see he was but goons and came from our school and others around here. Apparently he hurts people just for fun. In the weeks that followed, he continued to receive these kinds of snaps. Sometimes it was videos of fights. Other times, pictures of American fists or guns with creepy captions. You couldn't do anything if you swung, they beat you up. So we acted as if nothing had happened. A week before Halloween, we saw a story about a party with free drinks, so my friend and I went. I picked it up in my old one. Corolla him. In basketball, me in a simple vampire outfit. The party was wild as we arrived. Hundreds of people, most of them in disguise, music blaring, smell of weed, alcohol everywhere. We were hanging out by the buffet talking to high school buddies. When I saw my friend tense up, I followed his gaze and saw a group of older guys come in, not disguised, just in jeans and hoodies. Seeing how the others made room for them, I didn't understand what was happening. We wanted to leave, but one of them blocked our way. I recognized him from some of the stories. Preston Billy, one of the kingpins. He grabbed my buddy's arm. When we tried to get around him, I tried to defend him. Mistress Ton stared at me with eyes cold and hard. He said my buddy had to have a little chat with him. Suddenly, two other guys were behind us and pushed us towards the garden. Once outside, away from the others, everything happened very quickly. Preston knocked my buddy to the ground, yelling at him for ignoring them. My brother tried to calm things down, but Preston didn't care. He hit him hard and he fell. I wanted to help, but someone held me back. I had to stand there and watch the guys beat him up. The sound of fists and feet hitting him was brutal. My buddy's body twitching with every shot that will haunt me forever. I can't even tell you how long it lasted. It felt like hours. Then I heard one of them say, "He's KO." They left him there laying on the floor motionless, blood on his face spread all over his suit. Then Preston, that arrogant jerk, stared at me with a smirk as he threw. Your turn, vampire. Before walking away nonchalantly, as if nothing had happened. As soon as they were gone, I ran over to my buddy, shaking him awake. But nothing, not a movement. My hands were shaking when I called for help. I stood there, his head on my lap, crying, begging him to wake up. In vain. I went back and forth between hospitals and police stations explaining the incident, but in vain because my buddy never woke up. He died on October 30th, just 2 days after the attack. I thought it was over. It was all over, but I was so wrong. The day after she died, I received a Snapchat from an unknown tale. It was a picture of him in his hospital bed, taken without permission. It was obvious. The legend from the next vampire. These facts are taken from a real drama in Queen Creek, Arizona, a suburb southeast of Phoenix. On October 28, 2023, 16-year-old Preston Lord was attacked at a Halloween party. Preston, a sophomore and basketball player, was there with his teammates. The party announced on Snapchat promised free costumes and alcohol. More than 200 teenagers from Liss and the area went there. During the evening, Preston and his buddies were confronted by a group of older guys after a friend filmed a fight. The situation has degenerated. Preston was knocked out by Talon Renner. Then others beat him up before fleeing. Witnesses saw someone dancing on Preston before he was dragged off the road. Police found Preston seriously injured. He died 2 days later. The group responsible, the Gilbert Guns, had been active since 2022, sharing their misdeeds on networks like Snapchat. 7 people have been charged with murder and kidnapping. Preston Billy, 18, Jacob Messner, 17, Taylor Sherman, 19, Talon Reiner, 17, Dominic Thurner, 20, William Owen Hines, 18, and Talon's Vigils have all entered pleas of not guilty as the trial set for July 2025 awaits further review due to the large volume of evidence. Between 4th and 2nd grade, I was very invested in a small Minecraft server dedicated to building. The average age of the players was 15 to 17, and we spent hours chatting every day on Skype. Very quickly we became close and we all followed each other on social networks. I got very close to one player, his name was Peter. He was in the same class as me, even though we didn't go to the same high school. I had heard rumors that he had a crush on me, rumors that he denied. It made me laugh because we only knew each other online. At first everything was fine, but little by little I began to feel uneasy during our conversations. I began to catch him in little lies, which annoyed me, so I decided to distance myself and stop talking to him. A few months later, when we were no longer in touch, Peter sent me a message out of nowhere. He told me he was considering changing high schools to come to mine, so he could benefit from state tuition. His plan? Living alone, getting by financially while finishing high school. My stomach got knotted. All of this seemed very disturbing and out of nowhere. I tried to stay calm and told him his plan was insane. It was strange that my high school was chosen. He insisted it was a pure coincidence and that everything was going to work out. I was still hoping he was bluffing, but shortly after, he told me that he had already bought his plane tickets to visit my high school and stay in my city. Fear took over me when I realized that Peter was totally serious, and that he had developed an unhealthy obsession with me. He wasn't bluffing. Even worse, he posted a picture on Snapchat from the airport. He suggested we meet during his stay. I refused. Later he posted more stories showing him taking a tour of my high school, filming and taking pictures, probably in the hope that I would see them. Luckily that day, I was at home with pneumonia, so I didn't have to confront him. For the next few days I was constantly on the qui vive, terrified that it would show up at my house. Fortunately, he never managed to find out where I lived, and he ended up going home, abandoning his project. What shocked me was that the rest of the online group never found his behavior odd. I felt like I was the only one refusing to see him and keeping quiet. He'd leave me alone, but 2 years later, right after I announced that I had been accepted into the university of my dreams, Peter reappeared. I had been foolish enough to keep following him on the networks to check that he wasn't lurking around. And then I saw a picture of him posing in front of the libraries at my university with this caption: "Transferring me here is clearly the right plan." I don't know if he really did, but I never ran into him on campus. A few months later, he found out I had a boyfriend. He contacted me on Skype for the first time in 2 years. Do you think he can protect you out of fear? I immediately blocked it and removed it from all my networks. I admit I've made mistakes. At the time I was young, scared, and surrounded by people who kept telling me it wasn't that bad. He hasn't contacted me since, but that doesn't mean he's not watching me today. This is the story that taught me things in the worst possible way. You can roll your eyes and point out all the bad decisions I've made, and you'd be right. But you can you can roll your eyes and point out all the bad decisions I've made, and you'd be right. But I sincerely